Hello everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in our series. If you listen to either of the first two DataExpert webinars, you may have noticed that I'm a new voice. Well, yes, it's true. I'm Angela, member of the data visualization team at DataExpert. Now, when I was invited to carry out this role of webinar moderator, I asked myself a question. What makes a good webinar? Among other things, I discovered that a good webinar must have a good presenter. We don't have a good presenter for you today. We have a great presenter. But before I tell you more about him, let me very briefly introduce DataExpert. With 70 members, DataExpert is Europe's largest independent operations support provider. Last year, we completed about 7,500 projects in the following areas as survey programming, data processing, data visualization, graphic design, MR technology transition support, custom development, and finally the trendy business intelligence. Today's 30-minute session is about service scripting automation. Please write any question you have in the chat area anytime during the presentation. You can even go ahead and check it out now. Just type hello. I know our presenter will encourage you to do that also. And so, who is our presenter today? Who will lead you through the world of scripting automation? Let me introduce and hand you over to Balázs.
Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome everyone. Hopefully I can live up to Angela's expectations. But one other thing I feel is really important in a webinar, and that is audience participation. So we have heard too much about social distancing recently. This is a great opportunity to create some social togetherness. And as I've been also feeling pretty lonely lately in my home office, it would be just great if you could all just type a quick hello in the chat section. Really just a quick hello, so I could see how many of us have gathered. Hi Zsolt, hi Noemi, hi everyone. Yeah, oh, I'm feeling better and better with each hello. Hi guys, so nice to see you. Awesome. All right, so there are 3 or 4 things I really want to cover in this webinar today. The power of automation and how it is changing our lives, and the cost of manual work. What an automation can do for you through our checklist. To see how it works in practice, I'm going to showcase a scripting automation example. And finally, I will deal with all your questions. But keep in mind that you don't have to wait until then to ask them. Feel free to share them until then by choosing the small Q&A button in the middle of your screen, or you can just type it in the chat section, whichever you are more confident with. And so, by the end of our short session, you will all have a better idea on what I consider to be an efficient survey automation, or at least that's my plan. But actually, we are going to start with something else that is not really on this agenda, but I think it will be very useful for you. And that is scripting automation. So let's imagine you have a survey which needs to be developed or built on. There may be different parts to it, but after doing 5 in a row, you actually feel like you are doing many of the same tasks over and over again. So if you were stuck in this repeating cycle, wouldn't it be a better idea to introduce an automation rather than just reliving this nightmare for the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th infinite number of times? Well, of course, but especially for bigger projects, it may feel like a lot of work. It has to be able to handle the complexity and cover all the different scenarios that are inherent in many projects. So how could a mere mortal human create such a machine? Well, we are going to cover this later on, but until then, to give you the short answer, it is all about planning. You know, with all complex tasks in life, they can be broken down into many simple tasks. Of course, this takes time, resources, expertise, and from my own experience, a lot of focus. So first, you need to identify all the fixed parts. Those are the parts that are always going to be the same. And then define everything that changes in the surveys. This could be brand lists, image statement lists, pipings in the question labels, but really anything that you would like to change amongst the surveys. And finally, now that you have your fixed and dynamic parts, you can start to build up a master script file that works in tandem. But as I mentioned earlier, it can be really scary when you think of it as a whole. You can immediately see that it is going to require a lot of time, work, and money. So how could you be sure that it is really time to commit or dedicate yourself to creating it? Because remember, once you have started creating it, there is no going back. You need to be committed. You can't go into it half-hearted because the automation will smell your fear and will mess with you. You will get errors, you will lose trackability, you will become lost in a project maze. And that will lead just to more time, more work, and more money, but not in the right way. So, of course, there are rare instances when it's okay or even better to work manually, such as when a survey doesn't have that many fixed parts. But the vast majority of times we are doing manual work, which is costing us in the long term. So the question is, when should automation be the answer? To answer that question, we should first check our current manual way of working, just how effective is it? This is far more easier to measure than just trying to predict the future. So let's learn how to recognize when manual work is an expensive investment. I'm sure some of you are right now enjoying a great cup of coffee. So let me bring in an example with coffee to keep this vibe. So there are different ways to enjoy your coffee. We have instant coffee, or we can visit a coffee shop. But for now, let me illustrate my point by focusing on these two other options. Difference between making coffee with a mocha pot and a coffee machine. So let's say every day when you wake up, you make coffee with a mocha pot rather than a coffee machine. In the case of a mocha pot, you have to fill it up with water and coffee, put it on the stove, clean it after each usage, and this adds up to 3 minutes and 40 seconds per day. While doing so with a coffee machine, you also have to insert coffee or capsule or whatever into it. However, as you don't really have to fill it up with water and clean it after each usage, the time spent daily will be much less. So now while it's making the loud brrr sounds that wakes up the rest of your family, you can be getting on with preparing your breakfast or something else equally useful. So I'm obviously not going to count that. But if you add all these up, it's going to sum up to 3 minutes less per day. I understand that some of you may choose the mocha pot over the machine due to the taste or the tradition, but this time saving adds up to 90 minutes per month, which uh, honestly it doesn't seem like a lot, but in that time you could brew another 136 coffees. And if you are wondering whether there are really 136 coffees there, yeah, I can assure you that I counted them. So that's probably a bit too much caffeine, but maybe that additional time could be better spent watching a movie or a football match. So let's move from this live example to scripting automations, and let's check 3 different scenarios and decide whether it is worth automating the task or not. First, we are going to consider semi-templated projects. I mean those projects under these which are sharing great similarities. It could be a certain project type or a product of a market research company, but they actually only function as a draft, as they are always being customized with many things. So if we are estimating with manual work, of course, it is not going to have a setup cost. We are spending some time on input checks, and it seems like not much time is being spent on copy pasting, but a huge amount on dynamical updates. So this could easily indicate that there are not many common parts amongst the final scripting outputs. Calculating with 2 to 3 projects weekly, this example sums up to roughly 1,100 hours per year. But it's with lower risk due to the fact that we haven't really invested anything into it and due to the lack of the setup cost. While if we were to automate these tasks, we would face a larger amount of setup cost. We won't really be able to reduce the copy pasting and dynamical parse due to the lack of the common part. So we will still end up with approximately the same summary cost, but with much higher risk since we have already put our money into it in advance. So in this case, automation is probably not the best idea. But let's check the next one. So the next one is going to be templated.hook project. In this example, I'm assuming that they share more than 75% similarities. These types of projects could also be a certain product of a market research company, but rather than always being completely reworked, they are kind of just being adjusted to the actual product or service advert or whatever we are most curious about. So in this case, we can see that the numbers have significantly changed. We are spending much more time in copy pasting per project than dynamical updates. So that seems like a great opportunity to automate. And after we check the final numbers of the automation, that shows a 1/3 division in terms of cost. And that pretty much confirms our theory. But there is still one to go. The last one is going to be multi-country tracking project. This one is quite similar to the previous one, but in a multi-country tracking project, we don't really need to spend so much time on copy-pasting the required questions. If someone is aware of the structure, I believe it can be done pretty quickly. But that doesn't mean that it cannot be done even more quickly. And in this example, if we use an automated process, we could reap the benefits of a huge decrease in the hours spent on survey scripting. So these three examples show us that in the right situations, it is well worth investing in automation. And if done correctly, the reward will be much higher as well. But why do I say that? Because cost is really not the only question here. If automation seems like the right choice, you also have to choose the right type of automation. There could be some of you who probably already have scripting automation, but still feel like the workflow hasn't really improved enough. So we have already covered the importance of cost, and we will go into it more detail at the end of this webinar. But there are other factors that would make you feel like your expectations are not quite met. So if you feel like the automation is not saving enough time, the scripting outputs are late, or could even be done quicker manually, well, that kind of questions the whole purpose of your automated process. If the automation produces errors, and you cannot trust the machine that is supposed to work instead of you, your partner in crime, well, then you will experience a decrease in efficiency as well. And if an automation is so complicated to use that only a very small number of people are able to make it work, well, then we are also not talking about a self-working machine. So I guess nobody wants this type of results, but let's check that out and let's check which one is the most frustrating. So we are going to have a poll question now, and the question I'm waiting your answers for is, what is the most annoying thing about an automation that doesn't work? So you're going to have 4 options to choose from: not making enough profit, not saving enough time, generating errors, and complicated usage. So let's all promote some safe social togetherness, and everyone please vote. Only I believe you cannot vote, right? Because you are the host of this webinar.
No,
But
I can.
really, you can?
Yes.
Oh my God. Well, then I'm the only one who is not allowed. And what are you choosing? Would you be fine with sharing it with the audience?
No, it's a secret.
Is it?
No, I'm just kidding. Tell you the truth, I've never worked with this kind of automation, but I really hate errors. So
Yeah.
for me, it's the most annoying.
Yeah, errors. Yeah, well, you could say that if it's not making enough profit or not saving enough time or it's complicated to use, that's they are all 3 of them are some kind of errors in the automation. But yeah, I can definitely understand your point because you are mainly working on technical field, and that's why probably it's more you can more relate to the errors.
Yeah. So It's
Are we
finished
seeing
now, I
any
think.
results?
Yes.
Because yeah, I cannot see that.
Yes, we get 39% generating errors, 31% for not saving enough time, 8% for not making enough profit, and 22% for complicated usage. So
Awesome,
errors
awesome.
win.
Yeah, awesome. You know, it's awesome, really, because I really hoped that it's going to give you a hard time on deciding which one should you pick, as I believe all of them are pretty annoying. And I have promised to talk about the key principles that all of our automations have to fulfill, and basically that's what we have done. And I really hope that all of you feel that it comes naturally that an automation has to cover these points. So, automation should be cost-saving and making profit, so it could compensate that one-time investment of creating it. It needs to save time and produce the output faster than it would take manually. It should be completely bulletproof. And automation shouldn't be another factor that raises error sensitivity, but instead a checking point, a net that catches every man-made mistake and purifies the output. And it also has to be user-friendly, so it could be used and accessed with limited project knowledge. So now we have already identified situations where there is a need for an automation, and we have discussed what a good automation looks like. But now how should we go about building it? And more specifically, how should we build a scripting automation? So we have already mentioned the importance of breaking down complexity to many simpler parts. That not only helps us during planning, but also helps our automation understand what it needs to do and how. Let's say that these colored shapes that you are seeing on your screen are different scripting outputs that we would like to achieve. After checking them, we can see that they add up out of 4 pieces of information. So first, the definition of what shapes are needed, the form of these shapes, their colors, and their order. After we have defined these fixed parts and stored it at the automation, the human user only needs to give the command, I need 2 red circles and 1 yellow square. And there we go. So not so complicated, right? I admit that this is not the most complicated project example, but we only have 30 minutes in this webinar, and yes, you will encounter those more complicated projects, but then again, you just need to adopt the same principle. Break it down into smaller steps. And that's what I've also done by creating the following automation. And would you believe that even the technology is good to us, we can create a script in only 2 minutes? Of course, it might take me a little bit longer now as I will be talking you through it, but still, let's have a look at that now. So this is going to be a showcase of a Unicom Intelligence or Dimensions automation. I have created this just for the purpose of this webinar and for you, but it is based on an actual automation that is still being used to this very day. So, yep, let's see about that. Angi, would you be so dear and time how much time it's going to take me to create this?
Yes, sure.
Awesome. So here is our automation. As you can see, it's just a survey. So that's why it's user-friendly, because it's just going to ask you a bunch of questions which you need to answer to. So first, we're going to upload the raw template. It doesn't include any questions at all. It's just a basic template. So now I would like to create a new script. Let's choose Hungary as the fieldwork country. This study is going to be about market research operations service providers like DataExpert. Now the automation runs a quick check that the template is unchanged, because if there was any change in the template, it would let us know about that, right? After that, we not only need to select the question blocks that we need, but we have to define their order. So let's say now that we first would like to add the demographics, then some advert knowledge and the habits. Then we are going to get asked for each section what questions would we like to add. Let's now go with gender, age, and postal code. right? We can define age bands. So let's say we are going to have 2 age bands, one for under 18 and one for everyone else, 18 and above. So let's say that I would like to screen out everyone who is under 18. So we just need to tick it, right? For the postal code, I can choose a validation. Let's say that for now, I only would like to allow 4 digits, so no other characters will be allowed. We're going to have 2 adverts with 2 key phrases for each. Poster 1 is the first, it's a picture, and it's about innovation and development. The second one, poster 2, which is also a picture, and it's about wide portfolio and scripting knowledge. Right, now at the habits block, you can see that there are 2 activities questions. The second one is actually a follow-up of the first question, so I cannot really insert it into it. And automation is well aware of that. So if I would like to adjust the second one, the script is already validated that no, you also need to insert activities 1 first. So that's how it's bulletproof, because the automation is never going to generate a script that contains error. Now you have to insert items for the activity list. I've already prepared these. And our MDD file is ready. So the MDD file is actually, if you are not familiar with dimensions, it's basically the script file, the survey. It contains both the structure and the logic next to it. So how much time it was, Angie? I know that I made this technical stuff in the beginning, but still, I believe it was pretty quick.
Yeah, it was about 3 minutes.
Oh, that's perfect. Right, so now I'm going to show you the script that we have created in these 3 minutes. And it's going to load up in a minute. Yeah, I'm running it on locally, so I need some additional time probably. Yeah, by the way, those pictures that I have chosen for the advertisement, they were not just made up names. The poster 1 and poster 2, the actual script is going to look for those pictures under these names. So that's why I choose those names. Right, so now the survey is here. First, we are going to get asked the demographics questions, which I choose as the first one. The sex question, then the age. So now if I'm under 18, I'm supposed to get screened out. And yes, that's exactly what happens. So let's write something else. For the passcode, if you remember, I chose that only 4 digits are allowed. So with any other character, yeah, it's going to warn me that it's not valid. So I need to change that. Oh, for advertisement, we can see our beautiful poster here about scripting softwares. I'm quite familiar with that one. And yeah, it's about scripting knowledge and wide portfolio. The second one is about CutiWeb tool, which I would say relates to development and innovation quite well. So right now we have the activities block with the questions that I have inserted. So let's say I'm never doing manual work, and let's pipe in everything. And now the follow-up question, because it's a follow-up, I'm only going to get asked for the positive answered ones. So only scripting, self-learning, and attending webinars. And that's it. So let's get back to our presentation. I really hope that it answered some of your questions, and we will invite you to ask more questions in a moment. But let me just try to answer one more before that, because it's one I'm sure everyone is interested in. But so I have already talked about how bulletproof, how user-friendly it is, and you have seen that it's quite quick, so it's also saving time. But now let's talk about cost and the break-even point. So in other words, at what level will the product's revenue equal the total expenses? Of course, this will change for every project, but I can tell you what the break-even point was for the automation tool that I have built this case study on. So in this case, our total expenses are the fixed cost of creating the automation. So basically that's the setup cost. Of course, this will vary according to the scale of the project, but what I can tell you is, for that automation tool, the break-even point occurred after the 11th survey, meaning that for survey 12 and every survey after that, we were making profit. And actually, we still are. So yes, there is some investment at the beginning, but the long-term gain is more than worth it. So now that we have covered most of the parts, just as in case of an automation, let's put it all together. So there are so many different ways how an efficient scripting automation could be built up. So even though it is really hard to come up with a universal method, I would definitely start with the one sentence I mentioned at the beginning of our webinar. It is all about planning. If you want your automation to be able to handle almost everything with minimal manual work, you have to consider everything that is involved. So planning helps you see the bigger picture, which is absolutely necessary. But your focus, it should be more on the actual mini task you are working on. And that is why simplification is needed. Then why? Why should we automate? We looked at some examples like how do you make your coffee in the morning, and even investing in a simple coffee machine could enable you to watch 12 extra movies every year. But how? You know, if it seems too complex, break it down to simple tasks. Whether it's business task or personal task, you have to break it down. You will see that those smaller milestones are really not that hard to achieve. And of course, it is really good to know the how, but when? When should you automate? Automation is not always the answer. You have to remember that. You need to crunch the numbers. You need to consider the people. It can be a really difficult task. So you need to be completely sure that it is time well spent. And if you have all these, you also need to be 100% committed to implementing an automation, and that needs to be right there, right from the planning phase. All right, so I think we have some time for questions, so I'm going to hand you back to Angela, right?
Yes. Yes, we received a question from Zsolt, and he asked, why did you choose dimensions for creating the automation?
Yeah, you know, considering all the scripting softwares that I'm using, I believe I'm most confident in dimensions. So probably that's one reason. The other one, well, dimensions really gives you freedom. It really doesn't, okay, that's not completely true that it doesn't have any burden, but it still gives you a lot of freedom, and most of the time your burden is your own knowledge. So you can control other scripts with it, other softwares. You can run a whole lot of commands and whole lot of languages in there. So probably that's why. And even, yeah, so that's other reason. But the third one is actually, this is a dimension script that I was automating. So yeah, that kind of made sense that I should use dimension for that, something like that.
Okay, and we received another question from István. What would you say that are needed to start working on an automation?
Well, you need to have a master input file and a really close relationship with your partner. Definitely a good team who can work together efficiently. And of course, you have to define what's the purpose of the whole thing. Like what's your goal? What that you want to reach? Because yeah, I believe after that you can start to do start getting with the planning And then of course everything will be adjusted according to that, but still you need some starting points. So what I would say is you definitely need a master input file and a close relationship with both your partners and your team, and then you can just figure it out from there.
Okay, thank you. So we don't want to run out of time. So thank you for the questions, and to all of you who joined us today. Don't worry, the unanswered questions, so we will send an email about them. And a big thank you to our presenter today, Balázs.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And yes, every unanswered questions, I will go through all of them and I will send you the answers in email. So
Yes.
thank you for everybody.
And if you think this automation tool could be useful for you and your work, or if you'd just like to find out more about this topic or any others, then please get in touch. And finally, do keep your eyes on your emails, as we said, because after this session, we will send you a follow-up email, which includes the link to this webinar too. So you can listen to it again or pass it on to your colleagues, and also a great offer, which is only for you who attended today's session. As you may know, we were about having one webinar per month, but in this period of time, online knowledge sharing is a lot more important than before. So we decided to organize the next webinar in 2 weeks on the 9th of April. We can all see that market research companies using CAPI methodology are having a difficult time right now. So our next session will be about a solution to, that makes it possible to show visuals during a CATI interview. We will show you how to bring the respondents closer. What is more, everyone who joins the webinar will receive a really great free offer, so it will be well worth it for all of you to join us on the 9th of April too. Until then, stay safe, thanks again, and remember to check your mailboxes. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.